this day, looking out for our service members. We also want to thank you for allowing all of us to return safely back to this place after a weekend of storms in some areas, snow in some areas, and in my area, only rain. So we ask you to continue to bless this committee and all of our members and our guests that are with us today. Thank you for Christ's sake, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative. So for the committee, typically we are going to try to have our meetings on Tuesdays. Of course, we also have to schedule around some of the standing committees. And so, but typically Tuesdays are going to be the days that we're going to try to meet. Currently, we have only a couple of bills assigned to the committee. I certainly expect that we'll have more. So we'll continue to schedule those, and then we'll also we also want to schedule some of our hearings to actually be informative for different topics. So we're looking at different items to include an update from Commissioner Ross from the Department of Veteran Services, which we're looking to do that as a combined hearing with our Senate counterpart to kind of just help just give one update, and then any others that arise. So if you have any questions or concerns, just let me know. The two bills that we're going to hear today, one is a carryover from last session, and the other is a new one for this session. So I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Thomas, who's going to chair the rest of the meeting while I present these bills.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Bonner. And it's a pleasure to be back with everybody. This is one of my favorite committees. I sit on EUT, which is one of the standing committees at this time. So sometimes I miss them, but I have to tell you, my heart's always with my veterans. So with that being said, Chairman Bonner, just one quick question. Did you want to present 110 first, or did you want to present 985? You told me.
110, if we could do that one first. That's the carryover from last session.
All right. With that, Chairman Bonner, the mic and con is all yours, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm working off of LC 461000. This is House Bill 110. This is actually a bill that we moved out of committee last year. The committee was gracious enough to help us get this moving. This simply adds an additional state-level protection for our active component service members. As you are aware, under the Military Lending Act, it prohibits Title Pawn from doing business with service members and those protected folks. And this simply adds a state-level protection and a state-level penalty in the event that happens. And so, as you see on the second page, it spells out the penalty. It's subject to a civil penalty of 4 times the principal amount advanced in such pawn transactions. It really is a simple, straightforward bill. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, with that, I'll open up for questions. Seeing none, Chairman, you did a very good job explaining the bill. Thank you.
Well, we definitely went. This committee did a lot of great work, I think, in fleshing this out last session, and really over the last couple of years on this. So I appreciate that work, and I think this time we'll be able to get it across the finish line.
It sounds good. Chairman Hitchens, am I recognize you for a question or a motion? Go ahead.
Make a motion to pass.
Second.
All right, motion to pass with a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Measure passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to the next one.
I'm sorry, I did have a question.
Okay, I'll recognize you for the question, but we've already taken action on it, but I'll recognize you.
I'll be happy to answer this question.
It wasn't blinking up here. Go ahead, if you don't mind, Chairman Bonner. Oh, hold on. Let me turn your mic on.
How will pawn shops verify active duty or dependent status at the time of the transactions?
Well, so it is an important distinction. It's not pawn shops, it's title pawn lenders. There is a requirement for the individual to disclose, and so they are working to some degree off of the individual coming in, that's requesting this. So that's the primary way that they verify. And then each company does go in and do audits periodically to make sure that they're not doing business with those types of customers. But it is an important distinction that it's not pawn shops, but title pawn, very, very different industries, yeah. But thank you for that question, I appreciate that.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to House Bill 985. Chairman Bonner,
Yes,
please.
well, thank you, and again, I'm working off of LC 461342, and I'm going to ask Commissioner of our Department of Veteran Services, Patricia Ross, to join me here at the table. This is a bill that was brought to us by the department, and this actually builds on legislation from last year, wherein this committee moved a bill and did get signed into law that increased the eligibility for certain members of the National Guard and reserves to be buried in our state cemeteries. And what we discovered in that is that there was some things that we needed to clarify, and there was also an additional group that was eligible for this benefit that I'll let Commissioner Ross kind of go over the details of the updates that this addresses.
Thank you, Chairman Bonner, and thank y'all for having me here today. The big things that have changed since last year's bill was passed is the addition of the Hmong Laotian Special Guerrilla Forces. They fought alongside our CIA counterparts in Vietnam. They are now recognized for VA burial status or federal status. So we added that group as now being eligible for burial in a state veteran cemetery. In addition, as Chairman Bonner said, we needed to clarify a few things. We found that it was difficult to prove that someone served their full length of service, that first enlistment in the Guard or the Reserve. That was difficult for some families. So we benchmarked what other states were doing and clarified that to simply said that they served not less than 24 consecutive months in the Reserve or Guard. The other thing that we ended up changing, if you're going down to line 42, specifically we found out that the date of you've served after August 1st of 1990, which was the beginning of Desert Shield. That was too restrictive, and we were asked to move that back to the all-volunteer force date, so that's January 1st, 1973. Again, still needing honorable service. And then the other big piece, because the rest is with our Hmong Laotian forces, is clarifying dependency. So that is online. Having a hard time finding it. Okay, I know it's in here.
Line 68.
There we go. Okay, line 68.
Is that what it is?
No, it is about children. And I know I looked at this before. I apologize. Here we go, line 49. So when we're talking about a spouse, minor child, or unmarried adult child of any service member, that was too broad and did not correspond to federal legislation that actually determines that for a child to be buried in a federal cemetery, VA cemetery, they needed to be disabled prior to the age of 18. So all we're doing is pointing that back to U.S. Code Title 38, where the definition of a minor child or unmarried adult child, we meet the same criteria as the federal VA. Sorry about that.
Okay, so we'll open the floor up for questions. First on the list, Representative Griffin.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a friendly question because I'm a Vietnam vet, but I don't know anything about the Hmong Latino Special Forces Group.
So
Will you tell
the-
me about them?
Right, so the Hmong people, as you well know, are
Right.
indigenous to Vietnam and Laos and that Southeast Asia region. And this particular group that it applies to, we're actually, in a part of the reasons why they don't have the full Veterans Administration benefits is that they were employed by the CIA starting in 1961. And so these were they were deemed to be special guerrilla units that worked directly for the CIA that did a lot of their work in Laos, and they fought alongside a lot of our own special operations forces in country, both in Vietnam and Laos. And very small population, but they were the ones that were the indigenous population that was trained to fight with our American forces. So it's not a huge population. In fact, there's about 300,000 some odd Hmong people within the United States, and roughly in Georgia right around 3,000, 3,200. And then once you whittle it down to the population that actually this would apply to, very small. But that's the general history of that particular population as it relates to Vietnam.
Mr. Chairman, may I add one thing?
Absolutely.
And so what the Hmong guerrilla units have asked for specifically from the state of Georgia, as well as what was approved at the federal level, is that their service be recognized now that they have been repatriated to the United States. They are United States citizens. As you can imagine, it was not good for them to be part of the guerrilla forces in Vietnam, and at the end of that war, many of them came to the United States. So it's that population we're covering.
All right, thank you. You have a second question, Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I also have a friendly question, and my question is around, are there any other groups that we need to identify? Because when I think about, I did not serve in Vietnam, but there were other groups, allies, NATO allies, foreign allies, that participated in the Vietnam War on behalf of the United States. And so I just want to make sure that, we recognize this group, and rightfully so, but are there any other groups, so that way they're not going to create this perception in the state of Georgia that we recognize one group, but we're not recognizing another group?
Yeah, Representative Jackson, that's a great question. And to answer that, so part of the challenge is we're basing what Georgia code or the recommendations to change Georgia code based on federal law, which the VA defines who is eligible for burial in a VA cemetery. In this case, they have added the Hmong Laotian guerrilla units. They've not added any other group. Since we do take VA funding for the majority of the burials in both Milledgeville and Glenville, we do have to follow federal code. So we can't be less restrictive than the VA allows us to be for burial. So this is the one group we're asking to be added because the federal government has added it to their burial, to their code that allows them to now be buried in federal VA cemeteries. But right now, there's no other group.
And I would say to your point, I do think that we, it's incumbent upon us to advocate on behalf of various groups that we may deem to be appropriate. I mean, say it was, Afghan interpreters, right? Or name the nationality that worked as interpreters for our soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, anywhere else throughout theater of operation. So I echo her comments. We're somewhat bound by changes in federal code, but that would not prohibit us from advocating on behalf of other groups that were our not allies in the sense as defined in code, but those that fought alongside our troops overseas. So, thank you for that question.
Yeah. Man, one follow-up.
Yes.
So how will we, let's say, because I think this is a very good bill, how will we inform them that they now have the eligibility in Georgia to be able to have the respect and honor that they rightfully
Yeah.
deserve.
Well, I'll let the commissioner speak to her official efforts. I will tell you that once this was presented to me, my staff, the huge staff that we all have, we began, and by staff I mean me, we immediately started researching among groups in Georgia, and we found a number of communities that were able to contact, initially online. And in fact, I sent an email out to all of our colleagues who have a Hmong population within their districts to try to reach out to them. My goal is to not just move this, but to incorporate that communication to the degree that if we're fortunate enough to get this to signature by the governor, that we have members of that community that are here as a part of that process. So.
Yes, sir. And I would tell you, this is a very active group, as you can imagine. Some of them are getting up there in age, but they come to my office every year to try and see if we could expand Georgia code to be able to allow them to be buried in our veteran cemeteries. And so we already have connections within those groups. And as Chairman Bonner said, we can definitely reach out if this was to pass.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, you have a couple more questions. Chairman Hitchens.
Well, I did serve in Vietnam, and I served in I Corps with the Marines, which is the northern from the DMZ down to Chu Lai. And I was very aware of the Hmong population that was there. I never did interact with any of them because they were pretty much the Viet Cong on our side. They were undercover doing intelligence work. But insofar as other countries, I passed a bill about 5 years ago for the South Koreans. They were probably our biggest ally, and they had 18,000 casualties during the war. And I worked side by side with the South Korean Marines, and now they can get Georgia veterans licenses and Georgia license plates if they immigrated to the United States, became U.S. citizens and Georgia citizens. And they're proud people, and they they have their own organizations up in Gwinnett County, and they were very thankful. I mean, they just beamed about it. And in fact, they showed some of the, showed me speaking during it, and somehow it got on South Korean television. And the president of South Korea sent me an all-expense-paid ticket to South Korea and put me up in a 5-star hotel and took me everywhere in South Korea that I wanted to go for 10 days. So it's you never they invite me up there all the time now for dinner, and they're very appreciative. But they were great fighters. I've known some of the North Vietnamese to walk 5 or 10 miles to surrender to us instead of the South Korean. And when people ask me why they did that, I said they played by Asian rules, which are significantly different from the way we treat prisoners of war.
Yeah. It really is a fascinating, the more you research into this particular group and what they did, it is fascinating because while in Vietnam, the U.S. was fighting a conventional war, the Viet Cong was fighting a guerrilla war, right. And then when it came to the efforts in Laos, the communists were fighting a conventional war, and these Hmong special guerrilla units were the unconventional force that essentially took the place of Americans in that effort, and so we owe them a lot.
And the reason I spoke to I Corps and being in the northern sector is because we bordered with Laos in the northern sector. In middle Vietnam and the actual southern part of Vietnam, Cambodia was on the other side of the river. But we also had other allies, the Australians, Thailand, Philippines, and New Zealand were all our allies. They had varying levels of manpower and equipment over there, but the Koreans were by far our biggest allies.
Okay, last is Representative Griffin.
Yeah, I'd like to make a recommendation. Once this bill is passed and become law, please get that information to the funeral homes. I'm a funeral home person, and get that out, because a number of just family members, American family members, don't know all of their rights from the standpoint of when they come into the funeral home. and what they can use the VA cemeteries for. And you know, we have one there in Millersville.
No, I very much appreciate that. I will say a number of these clarifications that we're making came to us, from the funeral home industry and a lot of our funeral home caucus here in the House. So, yeah, that is, as you know, I mean, that's a lot of times the primary way that folks find out about their benefits is that, unfortunately, that end of life, and the funeral home directors are certainly a great resource for us.
Okay, so I just have one quick comment. I love this legislation, and I definitely want to see it move forward. There was one thing you mentioned that in order to get the VA funding, we have to match what the VA defines as identified veterans, I guess. Correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Is there maybe we can do some subsequent legislation that just kind of automatically identifies whatever the VA calls out, so that way, we're not always having to change the code, but something maybe more general that just accepts the list identified by the federal government. This is spitball. It's probably not the appropriate time to bring it up, but it's just I love this, and this way it'll always be all encompassing, and we don't.
Well, the only thing that I would see, and I'll defer to the commissioner on this, is that, like, for instance, with this group, they don't have the full complement of VA benefits. They only have this benefit, and so it could be that subsequent additions to federal code. I mean, they may recognize one group that has all the benefits, or one group that has so. I think it would be, even though it does take time and effort to address these individually, a lot of times these are individual circumstances depending on the particular community recognized.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, it was just kind of a general question. So.
And if I may, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of the issue also is, in this case, the VA does not fund the interment of whether it be the Hmong, whether it be Reserve Guard, or their eligible family members. And so as part of this legislation is our ability to charge for those burials to cover cost. And so that's one of the reasons why it's probably a little bit more detailed than just, to Chairman Bonner's point, just tying it back to federal legislation.
Okay, I think that answered my question. It was just a general thought to make sure that if we did that way, maybe it was something a little more proactive, but happy to do it. And I think this is a great bill again. A very friendly question. I am going to go ahead and recognize Chairman Saines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the chairman's point on the chairman's bill, I was wondering that too, because I know we've had a couple of code sections, but not that we're looking at that, but it is one of the reasons also that we can't be more restrictive, but we can be less restrictive if there's ever a group for some reason that the federal government does classify that we might have any hesitation on, or is that not necessarily the case?
Thank you, if I may. We may be more restrictive, but not less restrictive in order to continue to get VA funding for that active duty population and their spouses. And so in this case, we are mirroring federal code, and that's a great point, tying it back to that. But we also do have to add in the language that we are having to charge, since the VA does not pay for these interments.
So if we're ever though we can't have the privilege, which might be useful to add a group ahead of the federal government, if we ever have a supply issue for some reason and we can pause on extending it to increase groups.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the case. Yes, sir.
And I apologize for talking in theory, but thank you.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll open the committee up for any motions. All right. We got a motion to pass. Chairman Saines. Who was the second? And Chairman Hitchens second. With that, all those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? You pass unanimous. Thank you, Chairman Bonner.
Thank you.
Chairman Bonner, one quick administrative question. Do you want me to go ahead and close this out, or did you want to do it?
I do. You
have at it?
You got the
hand. All right. Hey, guess what? We are adjourned.